Hello, everyone. My name is Jamie Gabbard. I'm the administrator for the Village of Weston. Appreciate you all joining us here today to hear more about the 2026 referendum question. We do have some boards across the room, and we will have some time for question and answers after the presentation with the chief, the deputy chief, or any of the other SAFER staff that are here. I'm sure they're a wealth of knowledge if you have any questions either on the presentation or on the boards. Our presentation today is going to be a little bit shared. Chief is going to be talking to us, Chief Finke, about the reasons for the referendum and about staffing. And Jessica Troutman, who's our finance director for the village, is going to talk a little bit about the financial component and the tax component to the referendum. So without any further ado, I will also say this is being recorded today. We will post it on the referendum page of the website shortly after today's session, and we'll also record our one on the 19th. So if you aren't able to make it to that one, or if you just want to see if there were different questions that were asked at the end than from the ones today, that'll also be available on the village's website. So I will turn it over to Chief Finke just to talk a little bit about the presentation today and kick us off.
All right, thank you. So just a little bit of an agenda here of what we're going to go through, and we'll kind of go back and forth between myself and Jessica, and I'm sure Jamie's going to jump in a little bit. So we're going to talk about kind of how we got to the position that we're in, population trends, some of the things that are causing rising costs for us, how our department is currently staffed and what we'd like to do. We're going to talk about fire response, and a little bit, we'll drill down into that a little bit. The tax impact, and then like Jamie said, we'll wrap up with any questions. So how did we get to where we're at? So the fire district started in 2014, little background between the Village of Weston and the now Village of Rib Mountain. Those two departments merged together and formed the fire district. At that time, the plan was to save money, which it has certainly done, and kind of compile our resources to make a more effective and efficient fire response. Both things have been very successful. Just one quick point, because we're dealing with it right now, is that the district has sold off a lot of apparatus that we didn't need, that were duplicates between the two departments. So not only has that reduced our costs going forward, but we just purchased a new ambulance, and that ambulance didn't require any funding from the villages because it's been paid for with vehicles that we no longer use and that we sold. So that's about a $300,000 cost savings right there. That's just one small example. The number of part-time staff, we're going to talk about that. So the district was built with the primary focus of using part-time staff. And we still have part-time staff. We're down to one part-time staff position that is scheduled every day, sometimes with full-time people off. We may have a couple on each day, but we've moved down to where we only have one part-time staff. And the main reason for that is, number one, there's a shortage of firefighters and paramedics across the country. So part-time firefighter, EMTs, and paramedics can go work at full-time fire departments, get benefit packages, retirement, make way more money, have a set schedule. So that's one reason it's very hard to keep part-timers. And number two is part-time firefighters are just not as prevalent as they once were. And then number three, part-time staff are allowed to basically work their own schedule. So as you can imagine, it's pretty hard to get them to work on weekends, especially in the summer, overnight hours, holidays, things like that. So that was another reason where we just were forced to move away from part-time staff and have full-time staff that are on set schedules to make sure we have adequate staffing. We had significant inflation. Obviously, everybody knows that, the post-COVID years. There's been a lot of practices that have changed, and we've absorbed all of these costs over the last several years. So up until 2021, the majority of our firefighters were only paid minimum wage overnight. So between the hours of 11 p.m. and 8 a.m., because those were considered sleeping hours, although sleeping can be fairly rare, there was only a minimum wage pay given at that time. That changed in 2021, just because, again, there were many things we have attempted over the last several years to help fix these issues. And one of the issues was people were saying, I'm not going to come and work anymore for $7.50 an hour. So we raised that wage back to the normal wage that they make, and it didn't really help. And part of that is our part-time people have full-time jobs. And years ago, that was beneficial. When I started and when Eric started in Rib Mountain, it was fairly common that overnight we wouldn't get any calls, or maybe you would get one. That rarely happens anymore. It's much more common for the guys to be up either all night long or at least a good portion of the night where they really don't get any meaningful sleep. And then part-time employees were saying, I can't do that because I have to be able to go to my normal job at wherever it may be and function the next day. So we really struggled with that third shift. Until just recently, some of our full-time firefighters, we called them limited benefit employees. They did not get health insurance. That just changed just over a year ago. We had a fairly large number of employees that were not offered health insurance. That recently changed. 3 years ago, our EMS division chief resigned and took a position with the county at that time to help balance the budget. Our EMS division chief was moved from a full-time position back to a part-time position, which is currently filled by Kelly Gordon up here. And then over the years, additional training has been added to both EMS and fire positions, which in my opinion is honestly a good thing. State and national organizations have recognized that more training is needed to deliver high quality of care and to make firefighters safe. So they've increased both EMS and fire training, and they've added some standards, for example, for people that drive fire apparatus. There are certain standards that they have to meet that were just not around 10 or 15 years ago. So that has all led to making it a little bit more difficult to get those part-time and volunteer. We're way past the volunteer fire department as far as our call volume and things like that. But it's made it hard for everybody to bring those people in and maintain them. The days of, 60 hours of training at the tech college and you can come do everything are pretty hard to find anymore. So some of the options we've looked at, we've tried to recruit and retain part-time employees, and that has just proved to be very, very difficult. We have a group of part-time people that have been with us for a long time. We have one of our part-time employees that has been around for 25 years probably. But we have a lot of part-time employees. We would have our core group of 4 to 5 of them that stayed, but our part-time people would kind of cycle in and out. We would hire them. We would train them, they would gain a couple of years of experience and they would get hired by Stevens Point or Wisconsin Rapids or Wausau or Marshfield or Merrill, or they would go get a full-time job because they got benefits and things like that. Certainly can't blame them. So then we recently tried a paid per call or a paid on-call firefighter only program. So we brought these people in. They could be anybody off the street that wanted to try firefighting. We would pay for their training. We would train them on an ongoing basis, and they would come in off duty for fires only. We had, I believe it was 12 people originally sign up for that program. We go through a medical and psychological evaluation process. There were several people that were not successful through that process. And then by the time it was all said and done with the training they found out they were going to have to do and all those types of things, we're down to one person. So that program was also unsuccessful. We tried to apply for a federal grant to offset the cost of these additional staff. Unfortunately, we were denied for that grant. That grant is called the SAFER grant. I know it sounds the same, but they're totally different. It's a federal grant. It is very hard to get. Myself and Eric were fairly confident when we applied for it because we were certainly able to show need, but ultimately we were not chosen. And then the other thing that has become a big thing is automatic aid. We've pretty much maximized that. If we have a fire call right now, Riverside Fire District automatically responds and Wausau Fire Department automatically responds. So we've kind of maxed out the automatic aid abilities in the area already. As you may be aware, Wausau Fire is also going for a referendum to try to maintain staffing that they already have. Automatic aid is not always automatic either. We request them, but if they're busy, which fire departments commonly are, they may not be able to respond. So that we can't always depend on that either. But I think the point that I'm trying to make is we've really, over the past 3 to 5 years, we've tried all these different things to fix this issue and none of them have been successful or they've had limited success. Is this mine or is this yours, Jessica?
I can do the next one. Okay, so the key metrics, when we're looking at what really led us to moving from status quo to needing our referendums to staff additional people, we look at 3 different things. One is the population growth. Marathon County experienced a total population increase of 3,950 residents. Of that, 1,300 of those were chose to live between the village of Weston and Red Mountains. So that's a pretty large increase between 2010 and 2020. I know even beyond 2020, the village of Weston has continued to grow, has continued to see a lot of new subdivisions, new houses coming up, so that population is even greater. Net new construction, that's a key metric for me. That dictates what the levy increase can be. How much can I raise my operating levy? So that's when I look at the net new construction number. That is determined by the Department of Revenue. That comes out once a year. The last one is inflation. We've all experienced cost increases, and with that, it includes your materials for streets, your benefits and wages, and also everything else that a municipality and a fire district need to operate.
So over about the last 10 years, you can see on the board there, the blue bars represents our population and the orange represents our staffing. So our population has increased, and during that same time, our staffing has decreased. Now, when we're talking about staffing here, we're not talking about our daily staffing, we're talking about the total number of people on our roster. When I started with the fire district, we were in the 60s, and now we hang in the low 40s is pretty much, that's our entire roster, both full-time and part-time. Admin staff, we have staff that just do interfacility transfers, which is one hospital to another. That number is all encompassing. So we got a little bit of an inverse ratio thing here where more and more people are coming in and less people are able to cover them. We've had some increased costs over the years. I think everybody has had that. The biggest one that we battle with every year, and it's not just the fire district, the villages also run into this issue, is health insurance. Every year when we do our budget, that big one that always hangs out there that we have very little control over is our health insurance. So when I look back with our vendor, since 2015, we've had an 85% increase in our health insurance. And for anybody that has ever done that before, health insurance is a big number. I budget $430,000 a year for health insurance. So when we have to add, it's an average of 7.11%. If I have to add 7% to that every year, that's a huge number right off the bat that we can't do anything about. Now, can we do things about it, such as change our coverage? The answer is yes, and we already have done that. So our health insurance has gotten worse over the years, but our costs have still gone up. So we've done as much as we can to balance it. We have a high deductible plan. We've done other things with creative ways like direct care providers we've done in the last couple of years here, which has actually worked out good. So we've been as creative as we possibly can be when it comes to things like health insurance. We've also done some other things as far as Callie works really hard. We spend a lot of money on EMS supplies every year. That number closes in on $100,000 of supplies that we use daily in the back of our ambulance, IV catheters, bandages, splinting supplies, all those different things. And those costs continue to go up every year also. One of our vendors, and quite honestly, they're a vendor that doesn't have a whole lot of competition, so we can't just change, but they have a mandatory minimum 6% price increase every year. They don't care what the market is doing. They will go up at a minimum 6% every year in costs. We have, again, no control over that. And I know that the answer could be, we'll get it from somebody else. We can't. They don't have any competition in their space, really. And I think they know that. So some of those things are just very difficult for us to navigate. Maintenance is another one I'll just touch on briefly. If anybody has had their car worked on recently, those costs are certainly up. And when you have to work on a fire engine or a ladder truck or an ambulance, those costs are magnified even more. Our fire apparatus, we get a lot of the work done locally, but there are certain things when it involves pumps and other things like that. We have a company which is called Red Power Diesel out of Fremont. They travel to us in most cases, and they are a specialized fire truck repair company, and they are also quite expensive. We do some work internally as much as we possibly can, but a lot of that we have to call in other agencies for.
Okay, this next slide, it compares your CPI which is Consumer Price Index versus the net new construction. So CPI really is an indicator of how your normal day-to-day expenditures are going up, and net new construction is the percent that the village is allowed to increase their operations levy. As you can see, from 21 through 24, there was a really large gap between the inflation and the net new construction number. We've kind of closed it, but if you go to the next slide, you can see that net new construction, the allowable increase isn't a lot. If you look at this net new construction, that's the percentage that you can increase your operational levy over last year. 2026, the budget year for 2026, that was our largest increase in the last 8 years or so, and that was 131,000. That increase needs to cover all our wage and benefit and all those inflation increases that we talked about in the last couple slides.
I think this one is mine. This shows the cost per resident, and anybody can go and do this. This is a website, it's a policy forum. And you can kind of see on the left side, there's all kinds of things you can look at, from debt to shared revenue. It compares your municipality, and there's a drop down in there. You can put any village or city you want to in there. Now, my disclaimer is this data is from 2023. It's the most recent they have available. But this is fire and EMS spending for these different municipalities. And I have 10 of them in there. Similar size, such as Baraboo and Chippewa Falls. I have Wass in there. I realize Wass is larger, but they're local, so I put them in there. We have some that are smaller, such as Anago. City of Marshfield is in there, and then I have our next door neighbors here of Schofield and Rothschild. And you can see that we are significantly cheaper than every one of those communities right now for fire and EMS costs. So we've done a really good job since the creation of the district of maintaining our costs as cheap as we can. But we've come to a point here where we just need a little bit of help. So the next slides, I realize we when I put this presentation together, I was trying to figure out a good way to show this, and we tried some graphics that we couldn't get to cooperate. But I want to talk a little bit about the difference in staffing numbers and what it gets you. So as we sit today, our maximum staffing is 9 and our minimum staffing is 7. So what that means is that we have 9 people per shift, but obviously people get days off. They have vacation days. People are sick. People get injured, things like that. People may be an FMLA for the birth of a child or something like that. So it's rare that we're fully staffed with 9 people. Usually somebody's injured, on vacation, sick, something of that nature. So our minimum staffing is 7. That means that if people are on vacation and we get a sick call, and our staffing would drop to 6, we will offer people to come in and work an extra shift. If nobody offers to come in, we actually order people in. The fire service will tell people you have to come to work. I don't care that it's Christmas Day and you're going to spend time with your family. You have to come to work. It's part of the job. So people will get, we call them order-ins, and they will be ordered in to come on duty. So again, maximum is 9, minimum is 7 today. The goal is to get to a maximum of 11, and the minimum will be 8 or 9. We haven't actually firmly figured that out yet. But what the biggest thing that gets you is when we're at that higher staffing level, instead of staffing 2 ambulances, we're able to staff 3. And then number 2, it gives us a more robust fire response. So the way we sit right now is I'm just gonna let them figure out if they have to leave or not. You're good. So if we have a ambulance out in the village of Weston right now and a fire call comes in, most days there's only 2 people able to respond. And I have a couple incidents that we're gonna bring up here towards the end of the presentation of some issues that we've ran into the past couple of years here because of that. So if we're able to add more staffing, you can see that we can staff more vehicles. So if we're fully staffed, we're able to staff an ambulance here, or 2 ambulances here, and then a rescue truck. And at the station 1 in Rib Mountain, we can staff an engine and an ambulance. And you can kind of see that some of those vehicles are cross-staffed. So firefighters will jump off of one truck and onto another if they're in the station. Go to the next one.
See one thing quick.
Yes.
We have two guys with an ambulance staffed over in Rib Mountain, and that call was in Rib Mountain. That's why the guys aren't getting up right now. I just see people kind of looking around. Andy's the captain from Rib Mountain, so he went out to check on his crew to see if they needed additional help, but we do, because of the travel distance. We have an ambulance with two guys in Rib Mountain who are responding to that call.
So as you can see, as we go down with staffing here, so we went from 9 firefighters, now we're down to 8. That means we lose an ambulance. So now there's only 2 ambulances staffed. So this station is definitely our busier station. So today, if an ambulance leaves Weston and goes on a call, and there's a second call in Weston, then the rescue truck will respond if they're available. And then an ambulance has to come from Rib Mountain over here. Now, the problem with that is then there's no ambulance in Rib. So if there's a call over there, then we rely on Wassa to shift over and cover that if they're available. So we tend to get this whole thing in the metro area where ambulances are moving everywhere. And there are many days where it just results in delayed response times for everybody. Because everybody kind of ended up out of their service area and we chase our tails all day long. And then if we go down to 7, this is where things really get tough, because then if the ambulance is out in Rib Mountain, then there's really no coverage over there at all. And we had an incident with that I'll talk about a little bit later. And then again, here in Weston, the staffing stays the same. Just one thing I will talk about briefly, because this is a question us and a lot of fire departments get a lot of: why do we send a fire truck to an ambulance call? So years ago, and it's starting to be many years ago now, probably 15 to 20, it was common for fire departments to run 3 people on an ambulance. As budgets got tighter and tighter over the year, the easiest cut for municipalities to do was to remove 1 person from that ambulance and run it with 2 instead of 3. So that has been done for quite a while. There are very few communities, although there are some yet, that run 3 people on an ambulance. So when you only run 2, if depending on the call, if a call comes in and let's say it's a cardiac arrest or a seizure or something more significant, then the battalion chief will make the decision of the rescue truck needs to respond to that call also. So we have enough help to do that, because especially when they're transporting, if it's a serious call, there's only 1 person in the back of the ambulance because obviously the other person is driving. So there's just not enough that they can do on some of those patients that require more care. The other thing is sometimes it's quite honestly just lifting help of getting patients out of a home. You may have somebody that fell down the stairs and now they're in a basement with a broken leg or a broken hip, and there's only 2 people on that ambulance, and they have to try to get them up the stairs safely, and it just doesn't work out real well. So then a fire apparatus will respond for lifting help. So there are many different reasons that a fire truck will respond along with the ambulance. The other thing that we do now is that if the ambulance is out on a call and another call comes in, then the rescue truck will respond to at least provide care until an ambulance can arrive. So that rescue truck does do a lot of EMS care, but it's either to get medical care to them faster or to get additional help to the ambulance crew. Those are the 2 things they're doing. Is this you or me, Jen?
Oh,
Jess, I'm sorry.
I guess one of the main points we want to really point out, how much does a additional firefighter cost? And with the slide, we round to $104,000. If you recall, in a few slides back, I kind of showed what is our allowable increase every year that we need to manage our health insurance costs, wage increases. There are very few years that the village was allowed to raise their operations levy over $100,000. Last year was one of them, but last year was also a year where we did hire additional safer staff. So that part of our levy increase was allowed that to happen. So why we're going for a referendum is because we are looking for 6 additional staff. That's over $600,000, and the village is unable to raise those funds to pay their portion of those additional firefighters without a referendum.
So we'll frequently get asked, what do you do on your downtime? So again, we respond to approximately 10 calls a day. Some days may only be 3 or 4. Other days are 20 or 25. It's not always consistent, but it averages to about 10 a day. But outside of running calls, there's stations that have to be cleaned. So You know, like it's common for police departments and those things to have cleaning companies come in and clean their stations. Fire departments usually, some do, but fire departments usually don't do that. Firefighters clean our own buildings. So they have 2 large stations to clean. Multiple apparatus have to be checked every day. There are narcotics that have to be checked. There are very stringent regulations on how we have to check our narcotics. So those get done every day. And then just other ambulance supplies have to be inspected every day as well. We have SCBAs, we have multiple different pieces of equipment that are inspected and maintained on a daily basis. We do a little bit of repair, like I said earlier, on our apparatus. We don't do anything major. We don't do brakes. We don't do oil changes. We don't do major wiring repairs, things like that. We send those in for a couple reasons. Number one, we don't have the equipment to do that with. And number two, when it comes to things like brakes and suspension, it's a liability thing. They go to mechanics that are certified to operate on heavy trucks and make the necessary repairs. And they also get sent in every year to have DOT inspections done. Training, we train every day. The crew is already trained this morning on some special equipment, and then this afternoon we have some acquired structures, meaning houses that are going to be torn down. So we will take advantage of those, and they're going to go do, I believe, search and rescue training here this afternoon. So every day, with the exception of Sundays, there is training that gets done. Last year, there was close to 6,000 hours of training that were completed by our staff. Build and repair training props. If you go past our station here in Weston, you'll see the containers that are kind of in the back. That's built to be basically a small house or an apartment inside where the crews can go in, and we have the ability to put fake smoke in there, and we have a device that puts off heat signatures, so they can use thermal imaging cameras to train with those types of things. And our crews, a lot of that was built by ourselves. We did hire a company to build out the inside of it, but a lot of the props and those things we build on our own. We do a lot of special events. Right now we're doing a program that Battalion Chief Lang put together for carbon monoxide installation. So people, if they want carbon monoxide detectors put in their home, we'll actually come out and put them in. We do a lot of school visits, especially during fire prevention season in October. So we do a lot of special events in both communities throughout the year. And then we have a fire inspector that goes out and does inspections. We are required by state law to go inspect commercial properties and multi-tenant residential properties that have common spaces. So last year we did over 2,500 inspections. Some of those are small. We'll go into like a cell phone store, and Marty, who's our fire marshal, you typically have something like that done in 15 minutes, so he can get quite a few done in a day. And then you have other buildings. If you go into the industrial park, some of those buildings, such as Weston Supply, are massive, or the hospital, and it takes him a full day to do one building. So that is also quite time consuming. I kind of refer to him as the department cat once in a while because he takes care of himself. He's always gone because he's usually out in the public doing inspections, and he has to type up letters and send them. It's a pretty busy job that he does a really good job with. And then physical fitness. Both of our stations have a small gym with a little bit of fitness equipment in, and as the guys have downtime, they can go in and get some physical fitness done as well. So we're going to talk about NFPA a little bit. So NFPA is a standard across the country. We fall under what's called NFPA 1710. They have many, many different standards that refer to everything fire department. And this talks about how many firefighters need to be on a scene. So NFPA 1710 recommends that in a low hazard residential structure fire, so most of the homes that you're going to find in our service area, they recommend a minimum of 15 firefighters on scene. So including all of our auto aid and all of our people in house. So the perfect scenario, we get 14 firefighters right now. So even if everything is perfect, we still fall under that threshold. For a medium hazard, so a very large house or a small commercial property, they recommend 28 firefighters, and that number goes up to 43 for a high hazard, such as something like Weston Supply or any of our larger industrial complexes, or the hospital, or any of those hotels, any of those types of buildings. So for us to get to either one of those is pretty difficult in a reasonable amount of time. And we understand that in our area, that's just not going to be feasible. The other big thing that we've had is we had a recent ISO evaluation done. So they come out and they do an evaluation on the fire department, and you get points based upon your capabilities, and then those points directly affect your insurance rating and how much insurance is going to cost for your home or business. Unfortunately, we had our last one done. One of the biggest things we lost was what's called a water haul credit, which mostly affects our rural areas because we don't have the staffing available to staff a second tender. So we sold that second tender because it was just parked. So people that live outside of the municipal water district right now, some of them I take about one call a week recently because their insurance have come up for renewal. Several people have seen their insurance rates double. So if this would be successful, that would certainly help with that as well. But that's something that has affected the rural individuals. Just a couple fire and EMS statistics here. In 2024, 47 citizens died in structure fires in Wisconsin. As an interesting side note, this past Saturday alone, there were 3 different fires in Wisconsin that were fatal. Sparta, Brookfield, and Bellevue all had fatal fires. I wouldn't say that's common, but it certainly happens. UL did some studies recently. They found that structures today produce 200 times more smoke and burn 8 times faster than fires did 50 years ago. And just a couple EMS things, cardiac arrest victims, that's something that we do a ton of training on. We invest a lot of money into equipment for cardiac arrest. And for every 1 minute that it takes us to respond, the chance of survival goes down by 10%. So our goal is for cardiac arrest victims, we really try our best to be there in 5 minutes. But sometimes that's not possible. And we know that when we respond to rural areas or if we're out of the area on other calls, the chances of survival for a cardiac arrest patient are really pretty minimal. And then there's other things like heart attack, stroke, and I think I talk about those a little bit more here later on. This is one of our biggest issues is this goes back to the smaller number of part-time people that we have available, is that over the last several years, our number of firefighters that we get per call just continues to go down. So if you look at the last couple of years, our staffing, like I said, is many days that's 7 or 8 people. It's pretty common for us to have an ambulance or 2 out when we get a fire call. So our fire response is usually between 5 or 6 people. And when you think about fire response, we have to have 1 person that runs the truck. We have to have a person that's in command. So if we have 5 people on scene, that really only gives us 3 people left to do any firefighting with. So if that's a rescue situation, it really becomes very, very difficult. So this is just some comparison for cost per call. This is simply our budgets of these departments versus how many calls we run. So again, we operate extremely inexpensive right now. We're the least expensive out of these departments when it comes to our cost per call. We talk a little bit about firefighter burnout and firefighter fatigue. We do our best to try to keep our employees around that we have. Bringing employees in is very expensive. Like I said earlier, there's medical evaluations, there's psychological evaluations, there's a large training cost, there's turnout gear. There are many things that go into hiring a new employee. So when we have excessive turnover, which right now we do not, that costs money. But one of the big things nationwide is firefighter fatigue. And again, we just look at the number of firefighters that each of these departments have and divide them by the number of calls that they have. And our firefighters go on significantly more calls per person than most of our counterparts. Mutual aid, I can tell you when I started 26 years ago, it was pretty rare that you'd call mutual aid. I would say exceedingly rare. If you called it once a month, that was a lot. Now we call it a couple times a week, sometimes a couple times a day, just because we have our crews are out, there's nobody else, so we have to call mutual aid. So when our ambulance is out, if we have to call for somebody to come from Wausau or Mosinee or Riverside, it takes obviously longer for them to respond. So response times are longer. Although both Riverside and Wausau are advanced life support, if we have to call Mosinee, let's say for mutual aid, they cannot provide the same level of care that our providers can. And as a side note, so we alone requested mutual aid over 100 times. We gave mutual aid back to all of those different communities only 50 times. So the point of that being is we're calling for help way more often than they're calling for help. So in 2025, we really, our goal is to be in the villages. We try to be on scene for EMS calls within about 6 minutes. Okay. Last year we had 324 calls that took over 10 minutes and we had 24 calls that took over 15. Now I know 10 and 15 minutes sitting here doesn't seem like a very long time, right? We say, yeah, I'm leaving now. I'll be at your house in 10 minutes if you're going over to see a friend or something like that. When you're waiting for an ambulance, 15 minutes is a very, very long time. So we go on a lot of, I mean, we respond to close to 4,000 calls a year, and there are many of those 4,000 that are not overly urgent. Quite honestly, some of them could probably wait an hour and it wouldn't have a huge difference on their outcome. However, there is also a large number of calls where response time does matter, and we don't get to pick and choose which is which. We just take as they come in, right? So we talked about cardiac arrest earlier, stroke, heart attack, choking, overdose, seizures, severe trauma. All of those have been proven for many, many years that response times and transport times do matter. We're lucky in the metro area that we have two very good hospitals. We have Aspirus, who is a great cardiac center. They're a level 2 trauma center. They have a NICU. They have a great OB unit. They're a very well-versed hospital. We have Marshfield Medical Center here in Weston that, can provide excellent cardiac care and stroke care. So we are lucky enough to have those good resources in the community, but our part is to get them to those resources as quickly as possible. So I want to talk about a couple incidents we've had here over the last couple of years. The biggest one is the first one that I have up here. Blue Bonnet Lane in the village of Rib Mountain. We had, I believe Captain Lohman was actually working that night. They were on a cardiac arrest call in one of the townships that we cover. So that took everybody out of that station in Rib Mountain. At that same time, we had a motor vehicle crash in front of Bricks here in Weston. So not only did that take everybody out of our Weston station, but we also already had to call for mutual aid ambulance from the city of Wausau and from Riverside Fire District. So we already called mutual aid twice on that call. And then while that was happening, we had a structure fire in the village of Rib Mountain with absolutely nobody able to respond to it. Myself and DC Lang were home. It was about 7 o'clock in the evening. We both responded from home. At that time I lived in Wausau. I live in the town of Weston now. He lives in Rib Mountain. And at the same time, I called the battalion chief on the phone in Wausau and said, can you send me anything? They were able to spare me an engine. And Riverside was able after a little while to get an engine over there, but it took over 20 minutes before a fire apparatus actually arrived on scene there. That $750,000 house unfortunately burned to the ground. So that was very difficult. We had another one out on Highway O. Again, we had multiple ambulances out at that time. Only 3 people responded to that call initially. We had a call on Michael Drive here not all that long ago in the village. It was right at shift change. All of the apparatus were out on calls right away that morning. The only reason we had any kind of response whatsoever is because a couple of the people that were going off duty and going home were still at the fire station, so they responded. But we only had 3 people that initially responded, so they had to wait for one of our automatic aid companies, Riverside, to show up before they could make entry to the basement. It was a basement fire. Unfortunately, we did have a firefighter injured. She's still on light duty from that incident. And then during that call, we also had an ambulance call, another ambulance call here in the village. Both Wausau and Riverside and us were all busy on this call and some other calls they had going on. So we had to wait for Mosinee to respond from the city of Mosinee to come up for that ambulance call. And then actually just a couple weeks after that, all of our ambulances from Safer District to Riverside Fire District and the city of Wausau were all on ambulance calls. There was a child that was having an anaphylactic reaction. There was no ambulances able to respond. So an engine responded, provided some initial care to that patient, and then a Wausau Fire Department ambulance was able to free up and respond to that call. So really this has become a metro area thing. Us, the city of Wausau, Riverside all work very well together. We cover for each other frequently. But even when we cover for each other, our resources are stretched pretty thin. So it's something that is going to need some attention.
So as we were showing before, the allowable levy increases are not enough to fund additional staff, requiring a referendum seeking more funding. This graph here shows the amount and estimated amount that would be added to your tax bill based on your assessed value if the referendum were to pass. Additional staff will help us move forward with confidence. It will reduce the delayed responses and reduce firefighter fatigue.
Then we just included as the last slide, and it's also at the board there at the back, what the actual referendum question will be on the ballot. The way that the question is structured is set out by statute. So it does list what is the allowable with net new construction levy limit, what that is in levy, which is the $8 million dollar number up there, and then what it would be if the $600,000 was approved, which is the 9.2 million. And this would be an ongoing referendum, so it would be added to our base and it would continue on. A question that I think we have gotten a couple times is it increased annually? No, it's the $600,000 that's added to the levy base and it just continues going forward. And then we have up there what a majority yes vote means and what a majority no vote means. And we're certainly here afterwards, too, if you have individual questions. But at this point, what I think we would open it up is to questions from the audience. If there's something that we didn't cover and you still wanted to know, or other questions that you had about the fire and EMS. Does that mean we did okay? No other questions? Okay. And like I mentioned, we'll certainly, chief, deputy chief, some staff, we'll be here. So if there are additional questions, you're welcome to come up and ask. So thank you. Thank you for being here today.